Hello friends, so it's A Look in the Dark, a novel about the endangered, the trade in endangered birds, animals. It's chapter 2, part 2. The chapter is called Ground Bait, and this is the follow-up. You remember that Danny and his aristocratic friend Ricky were driving to Portland, just outside Weymouth, a peninsular area, to visit George, who was somebody that Ricky had used because he had a boat. Let's see why. Arriving in Fortune's Well on the all but island of Portland, they pulled into the front yard of a small semi-detached house. As they opened the car doors, a man in a blue boiler suit, actually more black than blue, from grease and muck, approached them. The flat cap did not hide the scowl or the darting eyes. Throwing his cigarette butt on the ground and destroying it with his heavy boot, he looked as uncared for and as uncaring as his garden and the home. "You're on time for once." The grunted, begrudged greeting added sound that matched the vision. "Nice day, George." Ricky ignored the sullen attitude. "This is the friend I told you about. Nathan Lister." The Eton accent seemed out of place here, but Ricky was unperturbed. As he talked, Ricky lifted a carrier bag from the boot of the Jaguar. The ever-moving eyes of their reluctant host kept returning to the bag. "Hi, George." The response to Danny's extended hand was slow, a handshake uncertain, and George did not meet the friendly eyes. Still uneasily glancing anywhere else, Danny was no snob. In fact, he was very working class, but he would have liked to have found somewhere to clean his hands. Yet he would come across worse than George. Nathan, as he was, did not like the man before him. It was not the scruffiness, nor the unfriendliness, but rather an inner feeling that this man should not be trusted. Hoping that this visit would not take long, he was certain he would never come back. He thought that George was something like a rat of a man. The three men passed through the untidy garage at the side of the house, where an old white van took up most of the space, jacked up and with the bonnet lifted. Danny almost hit his head on the ladder rack at head height, and then nearly tripped on the ladder resting on the wall at foot level. George led the way to an overgrown garden at the back of the house. The several dilapidated aviaries filled much of the space there. "It's the starlings I want to see, George." The stuffy and unpleasant smell of the place made the two visitors feel nauseated, and it was distressing to see some of the birds looking almost as unkempt as the place where they were kept. Danny reasoned that the longer the birds had been there, the worse their condition became. They were not just in captivity, they were in distress. "You keep birds?" For 1 second George met Danny's eyes but couldn't hold his gaze there. "Oh no, George, I study them in the wild, but starlings are my special interest." "Why?" Danny was slightly fazed by the direct and intimidating tone of the bird owner's voice. "I'm a busy man, and there are starlings everywhere. Often the well-known common species of birds are understudied. It was 1940s before anyone really researched the common robin. Then a man called David Lack wrote a book based on a detailed study." George couldn't have cared less. His face warned of slight irritation mingled with boredom. Almost wading through the rubbish at his feet, Danny looked at the birds. The disgustingly filthy cages contained 2 pairs of glossy starlings, 1 pair of amethyst starlings, and a single superb starling, all very colourful when compared to the common European Sturnus vulgaris that flock in town and country throughout the British Isles. Ricky was at his young friend's side. "Well, George," he said, "you only have another 100 species to collect, and you have the worldwide family." George did not respond to the joke, and Ricky remembered that was his usual reaction. "You might as well see the parrots while you're here, Nathan," Ricky continued. "Over this way." George looked at his watch, and Danny, noting the gesture, took a sweeping glance at the unfortunate parrots and congratulated himself that he could remember the Latin name, though he couldn't pronounce it. He knew little about parrots apart from all that Ricky had told him. The smell was not good here. Danny wanted to protest. Why keep birds in these conditions? There was noise, but this was not the singing and chatter of contented birds like those in Ricky's aviaries. It was all Danny could do to keep up the act and not threaten to report George to the RSPCA, the Royal Society for the Protection of Animals. He was in danger of losing it, but remembered that his being there was not so much about these birds, but about birds in general and in the world too. Almost for real, Danny, upon noticing the peregrine falcon, exclaimed, "Now that, George, is a bird and a half. What a splendid creature!" Danny Greene ignored, at least he hid his disgust at the poor bird's tattered condition. George smiled for the first time, and Ricky remembered that flattery worked far better with George than jokes did. The boat business must be good. This is an expensive bird to buy. Was a gift from a customer. George gave just a little away. I know someone who would pay a good price for that. Not for sale. George had returned to the most disposition, his normal attitude, and so moving toward the garage door he announced that he had work to do. Of course you do, George. Come along, Nathan. We've taken enough of this man's valuable time. Thanking George, Ricky handed him the plastic bag. The boatman birdkeeper ushered the two friends quickly through the untidy garage. There wasn't much of the usual Dorset hospitality on display here, so the two men were glad to be heading back in the car toward Weymouth. If the writing doesn't work out, Daniel, old boy, you need to try acting. No thanks, I'm too shy. What was that you left him in the bag? Ground bait, Daniel. Ground bait. I'm not with you, Rick. Rum. A bottle of his favourite. Give him 2 hours and then telephone him. A little good old-fashioned intoxication will soon remove some of his caution. I don't like him, Ricky, and I wouldn't trust him with my auntie's cat, let alone that sad-looking falcon. I know, old boy, his standard of agriculture leaves much to be desired. I wish I had never got him started. We had to talk about something at sea when I hired him, and he persuaded me to give him a couple of parrots. I thought he might drink less with an interest, you know. That started him as a bird keeper. I feel desperate about it now. I can imagine. It'd be like me taking someone bird watching and finding out they'd started into egg collecting. Do you know, George comes from a small village near Swanage. I once met a neighbour of his. Would you believe that his mother desired that he have a career in the Anglican Church? The amusement of this carried the two home in better spirits. Once back, the two conspirators enjoyed an excellent French meal, eaten as they watched a video about the Australian kookaburra, a very unusual member of the kingfisher family. As it concluded, Richard Claymore lifted the phone and punched in George's number. True to form, the crooked sailor was more than slightly inebriated. Still, the cunning caution remained, and Ricky had to spin a yarn about Nathan Lister's desire to impress an important client. A client who would be easily persuaded to enter a major contract if a falcon or hawk could be provided as lubrication for the deal. George, ever on the make, said he would need 50 quid. And Ricky promised it, which got him exactly what he wanted. He had George repeat the phone number 3 times just to check. It was a London number, and like it or not, for the two men, the investigation had already begun. So what happens next? Where do things go from here? You'll have to listen to the chapter 3 to get the answer to that. This story has quite a few chapters. I hope you're enjoying it. Nice to share it with you. Hope you're all well. And Kate and I would like to send you love and peace. Bye bye for now. Thank you. Bye bye.